right, and now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters for today. I'll start with Nancy. Nancy Frey is Professor of Educational Leadership at San Diego State University and a leader at Health Sciences High and Middle College. Previously, Nancy was a teacher, academic coach, and Central Office Resource Coordinator in Florida. She's a credentialed special educator, reading specialist, and administrator in California. She's a member of the International Literacy Association's Literacy Research Panel. She has published widely on literacy, quality instruction, and assessment, as well as written many books, including The Artificial Intelligence Playbook, How Scaffolding Works, How Teams Work, The Vocabulary Playbook, The Teacher Clarity Playbook, and Rigor Unveiled. Thank you so much for being with us today, Nancy.
Thank you.
Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Jim Marshall. Jim Marshall's lifelong work lies at the intersection of people and the organizations in which they work, and optimizing the synergy that fertile convergence holds. His scholarship, teaching, and consulting combine our understanding of human performance and organization development to assess strengths, devise strategy, and improve even the most vexing of challenges. Engagements have found him doing everything from evaluating virtual reality delivered training for active shooter containment to devising strategy that improve the community-focused impacts realized by the national network of over 150 public television stations. He is currently Professor of Educational Leadership at San Diego State University, the #1 ranked California State University College of Education. In his private practice, he serves as a thought partner to leaders seeking to hasten the collective impact of their organization's investments, especially their human resources. With over 200 publications to his credit, Dr. Marshall's scholarship encompasses a diverse range of works that includes empirical research, program evaluation efforts, and policy development. He is a co-author of Rigor Unveiled, Fixing Educational Initiatives in Crisis, and Right from the Start. He can be reached at marshall@sdsu.edu, and I will throw that in the chat for everyone. Thank you so much, Jim, for being with us today.
Great to be here.
All right. With that, I will pass the mic over to you, Nancy.
Well, hello, everyone. I am thrilled to be here. And perhaps you can understand, too, why it is that Jim has been such an integral part of this project, especially with that organizational perspective. Jim, you and I have known each other for a lot of years in working together, but this is, for us, this has really been a major collaboration in terms of writing.
100%, and it's been such an adventure. I will always remember the day Doug Fisher said, you know, we were going to get together and write on this topic, but I think we should do rigor instead. And it was as Doug is known for, it was like a major left-hand turn, I guess. But I couldn't be more excited to share these 54 minutes with you, Nancy, to talk about this new book. And like was said, it's hot off the presses. Like I was saying, literally mine just came to my front door 25 minutes ago. Just in time delivery.
So Jim and I are so excited to be able to be here, and we'd like to kind of set the table, if you will, for the work that we're doing around rigor and that we want to be able to share with you by first talking about another publication. And some of you perhaps are already familiar with this. It's from TNTP. It came out at the end of September, and the URL for that report is right there at the bottom as well. And it's called The Opportunity Makers. Some of you may know TNTP's earlier work around things like the opportunity opportunity myth. They were seeking to be able to find out who are those people that are making opportunities, creating opportunities for students. And so the place where they started is in looking at the 51,000 public elementary and K-8 schools that are in the U.S. And their first pass was to be able to figure out who are the schools, where are the schools where the average student is not at grade level in that initial tested grade. In the United States, that is typically at the in third grade for elementary schools. For middle schools, their initial tested grade would then be in sixth grade. So there are 28,000 of those schools. And they wanted to look more deeply then at those 28,000 who are making opportunities, creating opportunities for students. And what they found were that among that 28,000, 5% of them were, as they called them, trajectory changing schools. I love that term. And trajectory changing schools were schools that were making more than a year's worth of growth for every year in school. In other words, accelerating progress, starting out with students who were the average student scoring below grade level and actually making accelerated progress. And as they noted, they were interested in schools with a long arc of sustained improvement, not just a 1 year spectacular result. But what they were looking at were schools that had been able to do this for 4 consecutive years. And just to kind of put a face to what that looks like, imagine a child who's 1 year below grade level in third grade. And by the time she reaches sixth grade, if she's attending one of those trajectory changing schools, she's on grade level. That is a life-changing difference for that student. Here was the map that they published of where those trajectory changing schools were. They have not listed the names of them, but they did look more closely at 7 of them to conduct that qualitative research. They wanted to find out what's the secret sauce, what is it that they are able to accomplish, and what Jim and I were so excited about was that is what they didn't find. What they didn't find was a silver bullet solution. In other words, just like they did this one thing and that turned out to be the case. Or they didn't have a perfect curriculum or a single rock star leader. But instead, what they found is that these schools shared a commitment to doing 3 core things really well: creating a sense of belonging, delivering consistent grade level instruction, and building a coherent instructional program. And so those characteristics include things like, as they interviewed students and teachers and families and leaders, when it came to belonging, that there were students who said things like, I feel like they make every effort to know who I am as a person and as a student. Foundational is feeling a sense of belonging. Around consistency, that students said things like, we practice every day and I like that. Each lesson, each day matters. And I'd like to draw your attention to something else they reported. They conducted more than 600 classroom observations at these schools using a rubric, and found that 9 out of 10 observed classrooms rated at either good or strong instruction. In other words, not silos of excellence, but consistency across the building using grade level content. And finally, that students also said in terms of coherence, especially that in intervention, you get to see topics a little before your class does. That always makes me feel like I have some help with lessons that are coming up. And coherence, as Michael Fullen talks about, is focused direction to build collective purpose. And rigor requires coherence, not just islands of excellence that exist inside so many schools, but rather a coherent and consistent process. So we looked around for what rigor definitions are. And Baylor, in particular, really captured this in a very nice way. They said that rigor is about the learning experiences, it's about the assignments and the tasks, it's about the learning environment, and it's about the learning opportunities. But I'll also acknowledge, too, that rigor turns out to be the least favorite buzzword of 2023 in a poll of principals and teachers. By the way, other despised buzzwords in the top 10 include things like learning loss, differentiation, and fidelity. The most despised word. And what really resonated with us was a comment of one of the people that they interviewed who said, I liked the word rigor until it became overused and repurposed to create vague, unnecessary pressure on teachers. And another participant said, the idea that we should be moving kids towards higher order thinking and resisting the all too common soft racism of low expectations, that initially was exciting to me. But why does every good idea wind up being used as a dull cudgel against teachers? We wanted to take back what rigor means. Let's make rigor not be a vague notion, a dull cudgel, but rather to be able to redefine rigor in teaching and in learning, meaning that we're challenging students with high expectations, engaging them in deep and meaningful learning experiences, and supporting them to achieve their full potential. Our determination, Doug and Jim and I, was to make sure that rigor is something that every teacher can spot in their classroom. So as we talk about this particular instrument, really important to be able to say this is for teachers to be able to use. This is not a teacher evaluation tool or anything like that. But how is it that we can create consistency and coherence and a sense of belonging across the school? That means we have to find lots of ways for teachers and leaders to be able to talk with each other. So Jim, I'm going to turn this over to you. And can you introduce to everyone what the model of rigor is?
Awesome. Yes, I'm super excited to do that. The rigor model, or the rigor walk model, as we call it, because the idea is to, as Nancy said, add some definition, provide some common understanding around different elements that add up to rigor, while also guiding opportunities for what we call expert noticing. Again, stressing the point that this is not an evaluation tool. I'd also like to invite you, as I introduce the model, to think about the many things in this model you are already doing, because I guarantee you will find them. As we set out to reclaim one of the most despised words, contemporarily despised words in education, we began by thinking about, okay, well, what would the components of a rigorous learning environment be? And as you can see, we defined that initially and at the highest level as relationships, instruction, goals, organization, and relevance. And I want to underscore, as I always do, that the model begins with relationships. And without relationships, instruction will likely not be as rigorous as it could be, and so on with goals, organization, and I would argue more than anything, how can you make something relevant if you don't have a relationship with that person and know them in a deep and meaningful way? And so we set out to further define each of these rigor components, the 5 components that spell rigor, with 5 indicators each. And so this is the rigor walk model that frames the book. And we have populated it, as you can see here, with observable and measurable ideas of what it would look like in a classroom if we walked in and saw relationships happening, rigorous instruction, goals supporting a rigorous learning environment, organization of both the instruction and the environment that supports a rigorous learning experience, and then last but certainly not least, relevance that we know is so important, not only to motivating learners, but to creating a learning environment that engages them and sustains that engagement so that true and deep learning and conceptual learning can occur. And so we were super excited to develop this model. And in just a minute, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we ended up there. But I want to one more time quickly emphasize that expert noticing is not evaluation. The model is not intended to be a rubric or an assessment that an administrator might use to go check off what is and isn't happening, but rather this is a tool we see folks and educators using with their peers in collegial ways, maybe even framed within a PLC, so that they can actively observe and interpret what's going on in a classroom in real time. And so again, this tool is used to underscore and support that expert noticing. So let's just briefly touch on what expert noticing requires. And again, there's guidance for doing this in the book itself, but that selective attention, focusing on what matters and filtering out things that shouldn't be the priority as you conduct this noticing in one another's classrooms. The idea that things in this model go below surface to support rigorous learning and deep learning. And again, it's not just, it's about all different dimensions of learning that supports and incorporates attention to student behavior, classroom management, relationships, all of those things the model takes time and attends to. And then again, the whole idea of making connections over time, so that as you use this tool to conduct expert noticing, note the patterns and relationships between students and teachers, and equally important, watch those over time as they may evolve, watch for consistency, and those sorts of things that happen not just once, but become part of practice. And again, our belief is that in many classrooms across the country, elements of this model happen on a regular basis and can serve as a stronghold for incorporating additional elements in the model that may not yet be a regular part of your practice. Real quick, I just want to talk about where the model came from. And this, as Nancy alluded to, is something that Doug, she, and I conceptualized initially from a combination of the literature, which is key and referenced in the model and the book, as well as a healthy dose of practice, our lived experience as educators and the educators that we work with at the university and in schools across the country and indeed around the world. And so we initially conceptualized a model, the 5 components and 39 indicators. Today, there's only 25, and we use crowdsourcing through social media to bring in both experts and practitioners from across the country, and we received a lot of feedback. That feedback over time, we kept recasting the model. Successive approximation is what some might call it, but how about an iterative cycle of feedback and improvement, more feedback, more improvement to get to the 25 indicators that we do have today, all converged into that model I showed you. And then our next step was to apply it. So working with 4 different districts in 4 different states, 84 different rigor walks were conducted, and those ratings were anonymously recorded as you'll see, as Nancy presents some select indicators within the model, there actually is a scale that we use for each indicator so that you can calibrate your expert noticing and come to a consensus about what's happening. And so we had, using that scale, we actually had a score on R, on I, on G, on O, and on R, as well as a total. So it's a 4-point scale, 25 indicators, the maximum result would be 100. But here's why I took the time to say that, and I don't want to belabor this too long, but what we wanted to see was, is there a relationship between what we see happening as measured by the rigor model and some sort of academic performance measure? And thus far, what we used was the percentage of a rigor walk participating teachers, students who had made the equivalent of 1 year's reading growth. So basically, we asked the question, is there a relationship between the rigor going on in your classroom that we expert noticed and the percentage of your students who are making 1 year reading growth? And here, for lack of many more words from me, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000. So there is a direct relationship we found with these 84 observations, which was exciting to see. And as you can tell from this, as you move to the right on the bottom axis, the rigor, what we have as a variable, it's called score, you can see as that goes up, so too does the percentage of students reported to have achieved that 1 year or greater growth. So our initial efforts to validate the model do suggest that, well, it's rigorous. We have rigorously pursued just checking it out to make sure it is working. And we are continuing to do validation on the model and excited to look at other subject areas beyond reading. Nancy, I'll throw things back over to you to introduce a couple of the indicators so they can see a bit of how it all comes together and works when you take it out into the rigor walk exercise.
Absolutely. And so it's important to note, as I said, that when we talk about rigor, it's not just these few words that are on there. It's a way of us being able to speak more broadly to all of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you some other elements around building that expert teacher noticing in one's own classroom, as well as in the classrooms of your colleagues, by showing you and spotlighting a few of the practices. So let's talk about in terms of relationships, and let's focus in particular on indicator number 4, which is about academic risk-taking that's encouraged and celebrated. And academic risk-taking is a willingness on the part of a learner in order to be able to engage in challenging tasks and to be able to kind of drop that affective filter. And ways that academic risk-taking is fostered includes, a willingness to be able to share your own mistakes and failures, making sure that effort is rewarded, not just what it is, performance that's been done, and so on. And so as an example, and you'll find this in each of those, what we do is, first of all, we want to make sure that we're building background. If a team or an individual teacher not quite sure what academic risk-taking is, in each case we explain what it is, where it came from, and why it matters. And then over on the right-hand side, there's a guiding question around academic risk-taking. In this case, in what ways is the classroom climate constructed to encourage academic risk-taking, and how are we using language to be able to foster academic risk-taking. And so we also include in there some ways that you might spot it happening. This doesn't mean that all of these things are something that you're going to see in a particular classroom at a particular moment, but rather we want to be able to further expand that to be able to say, here's what to listen for, here's what to watch for, and so on. And there it is. There's another example of being able to spot it happen. We also use a rubric where teachers can kind of decide, hey, where are we at in terms of this? Is this at a level 4 or a level 3 and so on? And the reason that we did that as well, again, is not to evaluate, but rather to be able to zero in on, here's where I'm at right now, and here's what that next level actually looks like. In addition, each of the indicators also have classroom video to help demonstrate what it is that looks like. And so we'll show you a couple of different videos as well. This is from a high school chemistry class around academic risk-taking. Keeping in mind, we're asking questions. Students are asking questions, rather, and they're thinking critically and speculatively about the concepts being taught. So let's take a peek into a chemistry classroom.
Okay, so as I'm walking around, I'm seeing that we've got a lot of observations. We've got our temperatures recorded. We've got ideas around why do we think on block B the ice is melting faster.
3, 2, 1. Oh, geez. That must mean that. Wait, that one for the one.
Now, as a group, we want to come up with an explanation. Okay, remember, we're thinking about how do we create a claim supported with evidence and reasoning. And so we're going to do that. So you have a whiteboard at a table, you're going to come up with that claim. So something like this: on block B, the ice melted faster because, okay? We're hoping we can use words like thermal energy. We can use words like transfer and atoms and molecules, okay? So this is connecting back to the ideas of how we started class and the vocab we're trying to practice and better understand.
So on block B, the ice melted faster because block B is denser, making
Like
the
more atoms and or molecules, whatever, in less space.
Yeah.
And then since they're both like the same,
Like what's the word?
For what?
like adding more atoms.
Concentration?
Concentration.
It
Yeah.
has more concentration.
Like
of
it-
atoms,
yeah.
but it's dense.
Mhm.
This is metal. The electrons are free flowing, are able to share energy more efficiently.
I'm asking.
Like we related both of them together, so I think it's okay. It's
The
the metal.
energy transfers quicker to the metal from the ice than the energy transfers from the ice to the wood. And that's why this one melts slower than this one.
Welcome back. Okay, so we want to hear some ideas from each other's groups and tables. So again, we don't know for sure what the correct answer is at this point. All we know is that block A and B are different and that things melt faster on block B. But again, we're just going to hear ideas from each other just so we can start to think, okay, do I need to adjust my ideas? Oh, is that a good idea? I want to use it. Those kinds of things as we continue to work through this week. Table 4, what's your claim?
Our claim was on block B, the ice melted faster because block B has a higher concentration, causing a higher collision rate of atoms and reaction rate, thus creating more heat and thermal energy, which transfers to the ice cube.
Okay, so you're trying to make connections back to prior units and thinking about that example of students in the hallway running around bumping into each other. Okay, and so we're again trying to kind of make this analogy to help us think about atoms. Okay, let's hear from another table.
Since block B is metal, right? It's a metallic bond, which means the electrons are like free flowing. This one is wood. Wood is not made of metal. So the electrons are not free flowing.
Okay.
So when the electrons are moving faster around a substance, it's able to share energy more efficiently, which in turn causes the ice to melt faster.
Okay, so again, we're bringing in stuff from previous units, right? And when we talked about metallic bonds and metals, and we knew there was something different with their electrons. So at this point, we've gathered some data, we've made observations, we've learned from each other. And then tomorrow, we're going to take this information and we're actually going to use an analogy with ping pong balls to help us visualize what's really happening in these black boxes. So some answers will come.
And again, the spotlight on that was around academic risk-taking, and hearing students asking questions, speculating with one another, forming hypotheses, and so on. And so in that particular case, the conversation might become, what are things that Dr. Hackman has done in that classroom in order to build that climate and that culture of academic risk-taking? Take a spotlight on another indicator, this time in that instruction column. And in this particular case, lessons include input based on student learning needs. And so again, different features of that include that guiding question. Are misconceptions anticipated and addressed proactively? Are we varying the way students receive input of content? And so again, a number of recommendations about how it is that you might spot that happening. And once again, a way of being able to calibrate what is it that we're noticing in this particular case with this particular indicator. The pace, the content, and the mode of the input meets students' needs. Students' engagement is monitored, and so on. And so this time we're going to step into a math classroom and listen for how it is that the teacher is addressing input. What is it that she's doing as she is offering input on information?
Okay, so we have two very interesting things. All right. So Courtney, Omar, Casey, you guys pick D. Tell me why there's a difference here. What is the difference between this function of time and distance and this function of time and distance? The starting point. So where are you starting? You're in space already, right? Right? Which is nice, but we have to take into account that the space shuttle actually has to take off and then get into space. Okay? So you have to think about what it's actually doing and what you know so that you can answer these. So actually E is a better answer for the space shuttle. So we take off from the ground and we go in and then we stay because they stay in orbit, right, around the Earth. Now we're moving like this, but isn't that a constant distance? Yep. So this is my constant, right? I'm not changing the distance from the space shuttle to the Earth because I have to stay in orbit so that I don't use fuel, right? And I go around and I'm locked in there. And then this is my descent back down to Earth. Courtney, Omar, are you okay with that? Let's look at C, Earth and Sun. Okay, now this is interesting because now we got to think of what? Where are we starting, right? That's what I'm thinking about. Where is the Earth and the Sun? All right, and it's the Earth distance from the Sun, which brings up another interesting point. Because are we in a circle going around the Sun? Or are we in an ellipse going around the Sun? Look at all the science we're doing today. Okay, so we're going to think about that. I'm thinking about that. All right. It's a squishy circle. Circles, right? It's equidistance. This is equa from the center and an ellipse. It's like you squished it. Okay.
The teacher engages in explicit instruction while showing models, prompting students about their thinking. The teacher also engages in a think aloud, describing why one answer makes more sense than the other. One thing to coach the teacher on is how we might increase the amount of interactive dialogue so that students' engagement is optimized for learning.
So in this particular case, introducing yet another feature to be able to build that teacher expert noticing, and that is that each of the videos are accompanied by a short reflection by one of 3 instructional coaches in order to be able to say, here are things that I noticed as well. Expert noticing, in particular, really it is dependent on noticing the things that you should be noticing and being able to kind of move away from the things that are not a part of that. Oops. Another element is around organization. In particular. And by organization, we mean not only the physical organization of the classroom, but also how the flow of the lesson goes as well. And again, highlighting some of the research on that organization includes things like small group learning, which we know has the potential to be able to speed up the rate of learning, as well as classroom management and students with time on task, or in the case for somebody like me who pays a lot of attention to reading, eyes on text, right? I want to be able to see that as well. Organization, as I noted, includes certainly the physical environment, the accessibility of it, how rich and recent the physical environment is, but it includes things like those grouping patterns that are used flexibly, as well as that classroom management piece, that student behavior is proactively managed and monitored and addressed through productive procedures and interventions, and that the flow and the pace of the lesson are such that it keeps students engaged in the learning. We're going to kind of zoom in on indicator number 4, which is around student behavior being proactively managed. In this particular case, what we're looking for are things like students being able to take responsibility for their actions, that the student procedures are informed and are practiced and are known to students. And if you're in a classroom or in your own classroom when problematic behavior occurs, is it addressed in ways that allow other students to continue learning? So again, as a feature, we have video to be able to build some of that expert noticing as well, in this case, around the use of procedures. So this is a science classroom, and I'll let the teacher explain what it is that the students will be doing.
Very good, I got it. All right, guys, signal, please. All right, so hopefully you've had time to make sure your models on the papers is complete. You have like labels. Now we're gonna get to the feedback part. Just like the lab safety posters, raise your hand, remember when we did the lab safety poster carousel feedback? Okay, we're gonna do the same activity. Class safety, this slide says wear your goggles. Some groups are breaking CD cases or even spaghetti or something. Put your safety goggles on so protects your eyes. Backpacks should be pushed under the desk so we don't trip on them when we're walking through. Make sure we're calm, we keep our hands to ourselves. There's gonna be a lot of conversation, so the way I'm talking is loud so that everybody can hear me, right? But you're just talking to your neighbor, so make sure you're just talking at a voice that's appropriate for Babel. Also, our social contract about trust, be kind to one another. And then when you hear the timer, just get ready, okay? I'll probably just signal anyways. This will allow us to give good feedback, right? We won't be distracted with other groups, and we'll be able to give helpful feedback to each other if we follow these safety rules.
And going back to some of the features around spotting it happen, a number of things happening in that classroom, including a way of being able to get students' attention back after they have been in some collaborative learning. You probably heard the siren that went off, using a timer and so on, being proactive about all of that. Reviewing once again that there are particular lab safety rules that they're going to be using. Again, a proactive approach to being able to do that. We'll take a look at relevance as well, because relevance is certainly a feature of this, and really kind of bookends very nicely what this is. And Melody, for you, the classrooms are from K through 12, and in fact, we're going to take a look at a primary classroom in just a moment. But you're right, so I'll offer this as well. There are about 150 videos that are in the book that are all QR coded. So there are lots of examples from different grade levels as well. We're going to take a look. Oops, sorry. We're going to take a look in particular at the first indicator on that around relevance, that the learning process incorporates meaningful tasks that embed learning inside and outside of the classroom. And once again, a rating scale so that teachers can have that conversation either self-reflectively or within a group as well, around how it is that, what do we mean by meaningful tasks, and that in particular that students are feeling that there are connections among the tasks, the context, and their lived experiences. So we'll take a step into a primary classroom, and you'll find that the teacher is fostering a conversation with her students that is related directly to something that they have been experiencing in their school.
Okay, students, today we're going to talk about some situations that we might be in. So sometimes we can hear name calling or bullying on the playground, right? And you have to think real quick, like, what should I do, right? So you'll be able to talk with your table mates and classmates about what you would do and maybe why you would do that. We're going to hear the word ally and bystander. You'll decide if you're going to ignore the situation or walk away, or you'll be able to walk over to where it says take a stand. That means you're going to do something, right? Or you'll go to seek help from an adult. That would be a teacher or a noon duty or an adult that's around, right? Or you can go to talk to the person in private. That means you take them aside and then you will tell them something, right? Talk to them about it. So here are the situations. You see two kids making fun of another student because they are reading baby books. So this one's ignore the situation, take a stand, seek help from an adult, talk to the person in private.
It doesn't matter what kind of book you read, at least you have a book to read to make you smart and be happy. And I would talk in private with them so they stop bullying them. How about you? Oh, I'm afraid of him.
Okay, so we ended up with two corners. Does somebody from either one of them want to share why they chose to go to that area?
I'll say, don't do that to my friend. That's not good to people. Because you have to be treated how you want to be treated.
A student in your class teases a boy for wearing a pink t-shirt. Think about it.
It doesn't matter what color t-shirt you wear. Anyone can like pink. Everyone could do something, at least they are happy. I would talk to him in private because it's not what gender they are. What if a girl likes black or blue, and if a boy likes pink and red? It doesn't matter what gender you are. You can like whatever girls like, and girls can like whatever boys like. I would take a stand to say if they're doing something bad, and if they're doing something bad, I would tell the person to stop because you can make them feel sad.
In this lesson, the teacher helps students engage in social and emotional learning by focusing on differentiated learning experiences and providing students with an opportunity to work through their reflections, reactions, or confusion through a safe and non-judgmental activity. Using the 4 corners, the teacher guides students through collaborative conversations and reminds them to use empathy, especially as it relates to learning experiences that may differ from one student to another.
The purpose of all of these videos, as well as the instruments that go along with it, is really to promote calibration. Are we seeing the same things? And that comes through a number of different channels, not only in terms of the written material, but also in being able to put a spotlight on some classroom practices and having a coach able to reflect about what he or she is noticing as well. And in fact, the coaches are a key part of this as well, in terms of being able to kind of build that capacity in your classroom, in your team, and in your school in particular. As Jim noted in the chat, there are also, for each of the 5 major categories, there are longer videos and videos of about 10 minutes in length or so a bit longer, and more extended conversation with all 3 coaches. And what I love about it as well is that sometimes there's some disagreement, professional disagreement among them about what it is that they're noticing. You know, as schools, we don't always have the capacity to be able to have individual coaching conversations with every teacher at a level of frequency that we would like to be able to do so. And so this can become yet another way to be able to augment that. I started out with talking about trajectory changing schools and the findings, which are pretty compelling, that 3 conditions are of absolute importance: belonging, consistency, and coherence. And Doug, Jim, and I would offer that schools need tools to be able to promote all 3 of these so that it happens across the school and not just in those silos of excellence. Jim, I'd like to turn this back to you for some final thoughts and features that are in the book.
Thanks so much, Nancy. And I've been having a blast chatting with folks over there. And I was just typing my final one when you kicked it over to me. But one of the things, Nancy, that's come up that I love is, somebody said they just bought the Welcome to Teaching book, and this would be a nice complement to it in terms of doing some professional development with the staff. And I was saying, yeah, and even like somebody commented about collective efficacy, and this could serve, kind of as the centerpiece for a collective efficacy initiative in terms of what to work towards in terms of our collective efficacy. I do want to talk briefly about how the Rigor Walk might be implemented. Again, this is Corwin's first flip book, about which we are very excited. And, if you're like me, where form matters, and I'm trying to make this show up in the video and it's not, but it is a tabbed book that is meant to be used around a table in discussion. And as we've alluded to, there are many, over 150 videos I've described in the chat. What's there but examples, reflections by coaches. Tyler Gilbert is here. You saw him in the first reflection that was shared, and he's been doing a bit of chatting over there as well. But 3 amazing coaches, many of them Corwin authors as well. You got to see Dr. George a minute ago. You will very much enjoy this. And the reason, among others, that there are 3 is because expert noticing, you bring to that task your own lived experience as well as your understanding of education. And we wanted to provide multiple perspectives, similar to what would happen if a group of educators came together and engaged in this work.
And I'll note as well that Tyler will will be hosting his own webinar on a recent publication of his, I believe in the next couple of weeks. So be sure to tune into that as well.
So in the flip book that we've been talking about, the final section is the protocol for conducting a rigor walk. And I really was pleased to see folks talking about way up at the top of the chat when Nancy began. Well, would you do a rigor walk in all 5 components at once, or would you focus? And our recommendation, honestly, is to focus. You dive into it, understand the model, develop your understanding, but then we suggest you focus on R, I, G, O, or R. And we provide a protocol that you can take out, and as a team, conduct observation rounds, rigor walks with one another, observing each other, and then guiding your discussion, much like you see our coaches doing in the examples. And throughout the book, there are universal discussion questions that we talk about, all within this spirit of expert noticing that fuels continuous improvement. Where are the strengths? Where are our next steps? Where do we go next? How is this working? How is it what we are expert noticing? How is it working for our multilingual learners, our students with disabilities, high achieving students? And how do we continue the conversation based on what we've observed and come to consensus on as a team, specific to a component of rigor, for example? How do we keep that conversation going and expand it so that more people at our site in our district benefit from this expert noticing and our dedication to continuous improvement in these areas? And so we purposely titled the book Rigor Unveiled because that is within the spirit of our underlying intent, which is to reclaim the word and reverse some of the negativity that it has met with good reason. And so, as we've illustrated for you this evening, part of that intent is realized with definition, as well as with the protocol that can be applied. And then finally, with rich video examples that you have access to with the book, so that you can see both examples and also hear interpretation of those examples and modeling of how that collegial dialogue might happen in your setting.
So let's take back that word. Let's take back and redefine ourselves what it is that rigor really means: relationships, instruction, goals, organization, and relevance. And with that, I'd like to turn this back over to Olivia here from Corwin with a few final words and, all important, the drawing.
So if you have any questions that didn't get answered today, feel free to send those to us at info@corwin.com, and we'll get those sent over to Nancy and Jim for answers. Thank you again to everyone. Thank you to our lovely presenters, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.